What's up guys, Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. I just want to make a quick video for you guys today just to try and get you to pay attention to chord functions more. What that means is like the 1 chord or the 2 chord or the 3 chord or whatever. So in this video I'm just going to demonstrate this concept by playing a D major chord, this chord right here. I'm going to use the exact same D major chord, but I'm going to use it in 5 different contexts. So let's start out with the first one. We're just going to listen to what the D major chord sounds when it's functioning as the 1 chord in the key. So it's the 1 chord when it's in the key of D major. Alright, so let's now listen to what it sounds like when the D major chord is functioning as the 5 chord. So the D major chord is the 5 chord in the key of G major. The G major scale is G, A, B, C, D. So D is the 5th note in the G major scale, so it's the 5 chord in the key of G major. In that case, the D major chord sounded like it wanted to go somewhere. It sounded like a great second to the last chord, but it didn't really sound like a great last chord to play. The G major chord sounded like a great last chord to play because that whole chord progression was in the key of G major. The D major came right before the very last chord, so it doesn't always have to be this way, but in this particular example, the D major chord was functioning as the 5 chord, and typically the 5 chord is going to be your second to last chord. Again, not always, but a lot of times, all right? The point being is that the D major chord in that scenario sounded a lot different than it did in the first scenario because we're in a different key now. Therefore, the D major chord is functioning in a different way. All right, so now let's take a listen to what it sounds like when the D major is functioning as the 4 chord in the key. So in the key of A major, the D major chord is your 4 chord. The A major scale is A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp. So D is the 4th degree of the A major scale, so it's the 4 chord in the key of A major. So let's listen to this. So that time, I still played it as the second to the last chord. I ended the whole chord progression on the A major chord because this was in the key of A major, so that was a nice chord to kind of end that whole thing on. I played the D major chord right before it, but it didn't quite have the same type of second to last chordness as the previous example. I tried to just throw that D major chord in as many times as I could, not just the second to the last chord. I just try to keep throwing it in there just so you can kind of hear like, oh, that's what it sounds like when it's functioning as the 4 chord in the key compared to the previous example, which is when it was functioning as the 5 chord. So maybe that wasn't quite obvious to you, but this next example is definitely going to make this D major chord sound super different than all the previous examples. So check this one out. So in this example, we're now going to be using the D major chord as an out of key chord. So we're going to be playing in the key of B flat major this time. So in the key of B flat major, there's no D major chord. There's a D minor chord, which is the 3 chord in the key of B flat major, but we're not going to be playing a D minor chord, we're going to be playing a D major chord. This is very, very common. It's very common to take a key and take the diatonic minor 3 chord and make it into a major 3 chord. It's also common when you're playing a key from the minor perspective. So if we were playing in this exact same key from the perspective of G minor, it's also very common to take that D minor chord and make it into a major chord as well. Enough talk, let's just take a listen to how this sounds. right, so in that case, I don't know, hopefully you were able to hear that it sounded much different than the previous examples. So I actually did a whole video about this chord, not just the D major chord, but about taking the 3 chord and making it major. So in any given key, your 3 chord is minor. You make that into a major chord, it's going to have that same type of effect that you just heard here. We just happen to be in the key of B flat major. Therefore, the major 3 chord was a D major chord in this particular key. But it doesn't matter what key you're playing in. Anytime you throw a major 3 chord in there, it's always going to have that same type of effect. So if you want to check out my video, it's like 3 years old, 4 years old, something like that. I'll post a link to that. I do need to do an updated version of that video, but for now, just check out the older one. Anyway, let's go on to the next example. So this final example, the D major chord is also going to be used as an out-of-key chord. We're going to be using it in the key of C major now. So in the key of C major, the 2 chord is a D minor chord. So the diatonic chord for this key is a D minor chord, but we're going to be making it a major chord. So this is what it sounds like when you take the minor 2 chord and you make it into a major 2 chord. All right, so that sounds cool. It works. But the way I'm hearing it is when you play that D major chord and then you start the chord progression back over again. So I started the chord progression on the C major chord. We're in the key of C major here, so I'm kind of starting the chord progression on the C major chord. Of course, you don't have to always start on the 1 chord. You could play a chord progression in the key of C major and not start on the C major chord. That's totally a thing you can do. I'm just doing that here. I'm starting on the 1 chord. But once you throw that major 2 chord in there, once you throw that D major chord in there, it almost sounds like you're in a new key. You know, it almost sounds like that C major chord is not the 1 chord anymore. It almost sounds like you're moving to the key of G major. Let's hear how that sounds. So it almost sounds like when you throw a major 2 chord into the key, it almost sounds like that is the chord that is what you're using to move to a new key. So when you do that, if you want to stay in the original key, if you want to stay in the key of C major, that's cool too. It just adds like a very unique sounding effect. And that same unique sounding effect is always going to be the exact same effect anytime you use a major 2 chord in whatever key you happen to be playing in. We just happen to be playing in the key of C major. Therefore, this D major chord is functioning as the major 2 chord in this key. But yeah, major 2 chords are always kind of going to give you that same effect. All right, so hopefully this short video was able to help drive this point home, which is that a D major chord, although it's the same chord each time in all 5 of these different examples, the context surrounding the D major chord really has an effect on what that D major chord is going to sound like, how that D major chord is functioning, what key is the chord being played in. All of that has a much greater impact than just the fact that it's a D major chord. All right, so you could have 5 different songs, and all 5 different songs could have a D major chord in it. And one of the songs you could be like, wow, that chord just hit me so much differently than that other song. And then in that other song, it was like, whoa, that D major chord is really interesting. That was cool. That really kind of like, you know, it's all about the context. And that was the point of this video. So thank you for watching. See you next time.